Just some quick keynotes that I did as I found as I investigated them. For all of you that don't know what FAM stands for, it is Families Against Mandatory Minimums. So, basically what they stand for is they are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization fighting for smart sentencing laws that protect public safety. So if you're wondering, what are their core influences as far as wanting to start their organization? What's their purpose? What are they doing to help educate the community, the individual, and how we look at government's mandatory sentencing? Most of all, why are they this most topic as Spotlight to Liberty? So FAM is one of the most effective sentencing reform advocacy groups in the United States since 1991. They have worked to eliminate mandatory sentencing laws and have promoted sentencing policies rooted in the fundamental American values of individualized justice and fairness, proportionately and respect for liberty and due process. They share stories and families and prisoners and why they have done a commendable job of highlighting the human cost of mandatory sentencing laws and why they advocate for more efficient protection. So some of the things that they do, how do they advocate for such a sensible state and federal sentencing reform? Number one is they lessen the burden of overcrowded prisoners on taxpayers. Now, I wanted to do a little bit more looking into that because of course, we pay taxes, and when it comes to money, we're all very interested in knowing where our money is going. So just some fun facts. The last actual poll that was taken was back in 2010. This covered 40 states, and it showed that our prison population has grown over 700% since 1970. The average cost per inmate is $51,826. Now, mind you, this is only 40%. There's only 40 states that participated in the survey, which cost about $39 billion. A little fun thing, because I believe in transparency in government. This was $5.4 billion more than what they had actually reported to the corrections budget for that year. So just an interesting fact. Another thing they do is they shift resources from excessive incarceration to law enforcement and other programs proven to reduce crime. We're going to skip that word. I'm not really too good at public speaking, but you guys will just have to work with me. They mobilize those whose lives are harmed by unfair prison sentences to work constructively for change. FAM has many supporters. This is including the taxpayers, families, prisoners, law enforcement, attorneys, judges, criminal justice experts, and most important, the concerned individuals and families that have been affected by mandatory sentencing. So there's a lot of really cool facts that I found. I'm going to list off just a couple of them for you guys. So since FAM has started back in 1991, they have helped over 312,000 people in their sentencing. That's a lot of people. Over 1,800 federal prisoners have received sentences below the term called for by the federal sentencing guidelines, which the U.S. Supreme Court made adversary in United States v. Booker in 2005. FAM filed a friend of the court brief in that case has fought to keep the guidelines adversary sentence. Over 5,400 additional federal crack offenders with pending appeals became eligible to benefit from the Fair Sentencing Act in 2010 because of FAM's advocacy for the Department of Justice policy changes and our involvement in the U.S. Supreme Court. And you can find more information about this in the case Dorsey versus United States. Now, we were talking about Florida and medical marijuana. Over 900 marijuana growers were eligible for sentence reduction because of the changes to marijuana weights and sentencing guidelines, made retroactive by the U.S. Sentencing Commission at FAM's urging in 1995. One last little fact that I'll throw out there is over 1,023 people were released early from federal prisons through communications granted by various presidents. FAM has been a tireless advocate for executive clemency and has helped people see clemency through Clemency Project 2014 campaign. So just a lot of fun facts there. You can also go to fam.org. I really suggest that everybody visit that site. If you don't know what they're about, I'm still learning myself. They are a great organization. And I actually took the time to print out a little story that hits close to home in Florida. This story is called A Beautiful Woman. So, Scott Earl got addicted to painkillers after a high school sport injury. As an adult, he was still addicted, but managed to hold a full-time job at an auto dealership in Florida. Earl went to his local emergency room in 1995 for a painful thank you, attack and was given Vicodins. Days later, Earl met a beautiful woman at a bar who turned out to be a police informant. She asked him to give her a Vicodin for back pain, and he eventually hooked her up with a friend who gave her hundreds of pills at a time. The state of Florida initially passed mandatory minimums to target violent drug trafficking operations. FAM's Florida Director Gregory Newward told Business Insider, "This law has an unfair impact on people who sell painkillers, which come in pill form and weigh more than drugs like cocaine. What happens is it's almost universally the law of unintended consequences," Newborn says. This is kind of how mandatory minimum sentencing works. So even the judge can't really say how it's going to happen. There's a difference between the judiciary and the legislation process. So the judge in Earl's case, Mark Spicer, seemed to agree that his sentence was unfair. I quote, "I have to express my deep concern about this particular situation," Spicer said at sentencing according to FAM. "The punishment does not fit the crime." So, in closing, FAM is an amazing, nonpartisan organization that we should all be well educated on. And we should also look into our states to see exactly how much of our money is going to these prisons, how much we're spending on basically people that don't belong in jail for as long as they are. Thank you for listening to me.